Okay, so now we're going to talk about behavior intervention plans. This is a table from an FBA, Functional Behavior Assessment, and it's identifying the setting, events, antecedent, target problem behavior, and the consequence, and then the function of the behavior. Of course, this table is based on so many observations, and usually it's for 10 days or more. So here our client's name is Bill, and he is provided with independent work or group work to complete. That's usually the setting in which we see the behavior. So most likely the ABC charts have different settings, and we see that the behavior is usually happening during independent work, when he's asked, or the class is asked to work independently on reading assignment or writing or something of that sort. The antecedent, usually if the teacher provides instructions to be followed, if the peer initiate conversation with our Bill, and if the whole group is discussing a topic. So as you see, it's very vague here, and it seems like we couldn't figure out or pinpoint the antecedent. It seems like basically when there's a whole class thing going on, or when someone approaches him, or when a teacher provides instructions. So these are the three antecedents we have seen, and what we see him doing is that he would answer his peer who initiated a conversation with a very judgmental or sarcastic tone, and this is again very vague, which means he uses so many words during the observation that we could not write them all, or he's not using the same excuse me, he's not saying the same word over and over again. So the behavior is basically talking back to his peers and giving him a characteristic. It could be because the behavior plan is shared with teachers and parents. We didn't want to put down exactly what he would say, but I've observed this specific student. I'm sorry, and I would say that he mentioned something to a kid like, "You're fat, you're ugly." So I just want to tell you that you must be precise. Sometimes you work in settings where you do not, or you're asked not to put specific things on paper, but you have to be as close as you can. So he said here, he gives it his peer a characteristic that is not really nice to say. Now, usually we saw after the behavior attention from the teacher and attention from his peers, because then the peer answers back with a verbally aggressive tone. Peer will threaten to hurt him. So we heard a lot of students, after he tells them, "You're fat or you're ugly," they will tell him, "I'll punch you in the face," or he calls him another name. And some peers would become aggressive with Bill because of his comments, and the teacher would request that he stops. Usually, also, he's asked to go to the guidance counselor, and that was not written here. It was missed. So we see two functions of the behavior. First of all, he's getting attention from the whole class, the peer and the teacher, and some of the kids in the class would also react to his comments, and he's not doing the work that was asked. Because remember, the antecedent was asking the class to work sometimes on an independent activity. So he's at this point escaping the activity, and all the other kids as well, and he might be escaping it by being sent out of the class. Okay, so we have here some information to create our behavior plan. What do we need to do? Now, the two functions we're working with is escape and attention. So let's go to some of the things that could be helpful. Now, let's look at this first here. It says influencing factors. This is not really behavior analytic in nature, about, medication stuff, not medication, I'm sorry, like family, and was coming from home. That's not really behavior analytic. We're not really interested in what's happening at home. It's just part of the evaluation for schools. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, now we're going to go into strategies. So the first one is setting events, how you remove or prevent setting events. So the events are usually in the classroom and while kids are doing unstructured activities. So we're going to remind him of tasks needed to be done in every class while providing a visual schedule. Discuss ways in which he can solve or complete a task. Now you're helping him with a task that might be difficult for him, and you're also giving him the attention he is looking for, but you're giving him the attention on some kind of schedule instead of waiting for him to engage in inappropriate behavior. So remember, when you're doing the behavior plan, you need to meet the same function, which was attention, in a different way. Either you provide it after an appropriate behavior to increase it, or on a fixed schedule regardless of the behavior to prevent an inappropriate behavior from happening. It says here, how will you reduce the effects of setting events if they cannot be removed? Now, of course, he is in the class. Sometimes he also, as you see here, reminds student he's saying inappropriate comments or jokes. We're going to remind the whole class to ignore inappropriate comments or joke as general rule within the class. Provide adult attention on a variable interval of time to reduce students' need for attention from peers. So here's an antecedent intervention. If he's saying jokes or inappropriate comments, we're asking the whole class not to give the attention to anyone who does that. By doing this, we are preventing giving him attention while instructing the whole class not to do it. And we're not focusing on him, because that would be also giving him attention. We're just providing a general rule for the whole class to follow, and at the same time we're providing attention on a variable interval as an antecedent intervention. Okay. Alright, behavior teaching strategies. We'll ask him at the beginning of every class to ask for help verbally only from adults and share his thoughts when it's his turn. Provide opportunities for students to interact and discuss a topic of interest. We figured it might also be the attention from peers he's looking for. So we figured a way to decide when is the time for him to get attention, and we created opportunities for the students to work with others on topics of interest. So it's also an antecedent intervention. Instead of waiting for him to approach a peer or a peer approaches him and it becomes a conflict, we create healthy ways for the students to give attention to each other, and therefore they would not be doing any inappropriate behavior as a way to seek attention. So we're serving this function as well. Now, consequences. Now we're going to provide attention and praise by discussing how socially appropriate his behaviors were. So for him to continue to socially behave in an appropriate manner, every time he is approaching or initiating a conversation in a polite or an appropriate manner, and at the right time, not in the middle of a lesson, there will be an attention provided. And again, it has to be the same function, so the attention will be provided, and therefore we'll try to minimize some of the inappropriate behaviors, because attention will be given beforehand, and we're hoping that he will get his reinforcer, which is attention or social attention, with appropriate behavior, not with inappropriate one. Now it says, if the appropriate behavior happens, then what we do. Now we're going to ask the peers to ignore. Now sometimes this is difficult, and that's why we have to have it as an antecedent intervention, where we remind the class with the rules. But again, if that happens, we might remind the other student maybe if our student is approaching another one to bother or to comment on something or give him a characteristic as fat and ugly, we might want to direct our attention to the other student, not to our student, and ask him to just ignore it. Now, doing this, we are not giving attention to our student, so therefore we're not reinforcing his inappropriate behavior, and at the same time we are trying to not give him attention by directing his peer to look away or not to give him attention he's seeking. And we're going to remind the student to continue his work using brief words without providing much attention. So sometimes if we see that the behavior escalating and he's getting out of his seat and he's roaming the classroom, you might want to give instruction one time, come back and sit and just ignore him for the rest of the time. Because again, the more talking you're giving him, the more attention, and that's reinforcing to him, as our FBA had found out based on observations and functional analysis. This is just a brief way of looking at a behavior intervention plan. We're going to go over this again and how to write one, but usually you will have a table which summarizes your functional behavior assessment, and then maybe list of strategies, antecedent or antecedent, yes, and consequence strategies on how to work on reducing the behaviors. This is different than skill acquisition and discrete trial, where you have lists of things to teach and how to fade your prompts and the steps on which you're going to fade your prompts. This is behavior, so you are identifying the function of the behavior. In this case, we found that attention was the function, sometimes escape, but we focus on the attention because it seems like he would not escape some of the tasks if he gets help and he gets the attention from time to time. Maybe escape was not really a strong hypothesis here. And when we tried this big plan here with the child, it did work, and he seemed to complete more activities and work in the school, and our functional analysis showed that yes, it was attention-seeking behavior, and he was getting attention after appropriate behaviors, and also unlike a variable schedule, teachers now understand that that's what he needs, so they do provide it at the beginning of class. During class, they might ask him to do some help. They might ask him for some help to maybe distribute some of the papers they have or books. They might ask him to go outside and bring something to them. So this all attention really worked with him. So it's really important to understand the function and to collect as much ABC data as you can when you're doing a behavior plan.